Good morning, everyone. Today we have Fernando Rodriguez, our team captain and one of our drivers on the drive team, presenting our introduction to strategy crash course. Before we start, can you please sign in with the link in the chat?
All
And
right, we'll get started. So, as Nathan just said, this is an introduction to strategy development, which is part of the FRC Crash Course series presented by me. So, overall, we're going to be going over 6 major things, like a few definitions, differences between some statistical terms for FRC teams, what the drive team actually is, um, objectifying like offense and defense, figuring out robot weaknesses, and then going over some hypothetical scenarios. So the definitions are offensive power rating, which is denoted as OPR. Offensive power rating is just an objective way to rate a team based on point contributions towards a match. And then this will give other teams an idea as to how many points a certain team can score, basically. So I'm going to be using mostly 2019 examples because we didn't have the 2020 season due to the COVID-19 virus and all of that. So I'll be doing things with respect to 2019. So that was a lower scoring game just because of how the game pieces were handled and things like that. So an OPR of something like 19 or 20 would mean that a team can score about 19 or 20 points each match on average. The defensive power rating, denoted as DPR, is basically also an objective way to rate a team, but this time it's based on point denials towards the enemy alliance. Now, what this means is that if there is a team that is consistently doing defense on the other teams, which we'll go over in a bit, then they are denying the enemy team's scored points, and that's what DPR is. You have CCWM, or calculated contribution towards winning margin. There is actually an equation used by inputting both OPR and DPR, which we'll not be going over with because it's pretty complex. But it basically rates the team's overall contribution to any alliance using both their OPR and DPR. Now, this is a bit more significant than OPR and DPR because it basically lets you know if a team is kind of like carried or if they carried themselves. I believe that CCWM has both a negative and positive range. If it has like a negative range, like let's say a team had a CCWM of like -3, then that means that they probably ended up getting carried and couldn't carry their weight for 3 points. It changes each year, so I don't remember how it was used back in 2019, but I'm pretty sure that it was still used in point margins. And Drive Team is just a group of students and or mentors or alum that are in charge of scouting, match data, and robot control. Now, I just went over the definitions, so now we'll discuss what they actually mean or what they're good for. OPR is good for determining about how many points a team can score, and keep in mind that it's just an objective way. It doesn't mean that they're going to score that amount of points every match because something could happen. DPR is good for determining how many points a team can deny the enemy. And again, it's also super variable. And the reason for that is because this is more of a special case. There isn't like defense every single year, or there isn't heavy defense every single year just because of how games are played. For example, 2019 was super defense heavy. And for the games that were played in 2020, they were not as defensive heavy. So DPR wouldn't be as good of a measurement of how good a team did in 2020 as compared to 2019. And CCWM is good at determining kind of like the team's worth. Again, that goes back to the story of determining whether a team was kind of like carried or if they carried the alliance. And then just as a small note, usually only OPR and CCWM matter, again, because DPR is kind of variable. Now, the overall purpose of scouting is to make sure that you can find the strengths and weaknesses of both yourself and your alliance partners and the enemy alliance. You want to be able to use those weaknesses or strengths to be able to adjust a strategy. Like if your scouting lead all of a sudden tells you, one of the drive team members, that one of the teams that you're going up against can all of a sudden do like a really like overpowered method of scoring points, then you're going to probably want to focus on that team if you're going to be doing defense because you want to make sure that they do not get points. Um, this can also help you create a pick list, which we'll not be going over, but if you have questions, I'll still answer it. And overall, there could be a better chance of winning just because going into a game with an actual thought out plan could produce a better outcome. Now, going into drive team roles, the drive team basically has a primary driver, which is the head of the drive team, and they control driving and intake mechanisms. The secondary driver controls secondary mechanisms, such as scoring and climbing if we have a climber. The technician is responsible for talking to other technicians and also for match observations. And the drive coach gives pointers to the primary driver and communicates with other coaches during a match. So, going a bit more in depth into what the drive coach does is they don't actually touch any of the robot or any of the functions. What they'll do instead is, let's say, one of our alliance partners, robots, is having trouble and they need screening. It's kind of like in basketball when you screen people to make sure that the ball doesn't go past a certain area. It's just like a defensive maneuver. So our drive coach would communicate with the drive coach that needs screening, and then that drive coach would then tell me, the primary driver, to go ahead and screen for that robot because that'll probably get us the win over like doing defense, for example. Now we're going to move into offensive and defensive play. Offensive play is really straightforward. It's basically just scoring points with your manipulators, and obviously you just create a plan with your alliance. It's not super detailed because you're basically on your own when it comes to scoring. I'm going to pull up a field picture for 2020, and then I'll go over an example. So if you're on the blue alliance, which is on this side here, and then you're going to be going up against the red alliance. Now, there's basically a few paths that you can take if you're a scoring robot. I believe that you received these cargo cells or fuel cells, sorry, from this side here, and you have to score it into basically either that top port or that bottom port. Now, you're gonna want to like be able to back up to actually shoot into the top port. Because not many robots can just stand directly under and actually just shoot straight up because this thing is like 7 feet tall, I think, which is like a ridiculous angle. So you basically just want to make sure that you're not getting in the way of your alliance partners. If your robot is like really good at scoring high points, then you're gonna want to make sure that the other two robots are staying out of your way so that you can score as many of the points as possible. And then we'll move on to 2019 now. This here's a picture of the 2019 field. If you're doing offensive play, then you're going to be focused on picking up these circular discs, which are called hatch panels. You're going to want to like put it on the side of the rocket, the front face, and also here on the cargo ship. Um, again, you're just going to make a strategy to make sure that you're not bumping into your alliance partners. Again, you took the resources from your side. So you want to make sure that this area is not cluttered with robots constantly. And you also want to make sure that when you're getting like game pieces, that if you're doing like a cross like that, that you're not going to be messing with another robot that's over here, for example. All right, now we're going to move into defensive play. Now, defensive play is split into pure defense and counter defense. Pure defense is literally just defensive action on our alliance to ensure that our robots can score. And then you'll do pure defense if you know that another team is going to be doing defense, and the team that is with you that you want to do defense on is going to score like a really high point load. So this is going to include screening, pit maneuvers, blocking, and pivoting. Blocking and pivoting is literally self-explanatory. Pivot, you're just going to want to sit on one spot and change your angle to make sure that you can drive forward or backwards to make sure that you deny another robot from entering. And then screening is just, again, like think of basketball when people screen like a certain member to make sure that they can pass and go ahead. Then you have counter defense, which is a bit more complex. It's basically offensive defense on the opposing alliance in order to deny enemy robots from scoring. So this is when you send one of your alliance partners over to the opposite side to go ahead and keep one of the robots from scoring, or maybe two if you can go ahead and do that. And then again, this will be done through pit maneuvers, blocking, pivoting. For pit maneuvers, if you think of like think of like a show or something like that, like maybe an action movie of when there's like a chase scene in two cars and one of the cars hits like the back of the other car and then the front car spins out. You can do things like that in FRC based on wheel types, which we'll go over in a second. Um, First, we'll watch a few clips to actually show what's going on, and then I'll be doing like a live analysis of what's going on. These are actually like clips that we competed in, and I'll show that in a quick second. This year was actually in Houston at the World Championships, and we are part of the Blue Alliance, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, we're part of the Blue Alliance. So if you see, we start. Looks like we started in the middle right there. So this year is part of the autonomous phase, which is just the first 15 seconds in which there is no drivers controlling anything. Actually, in this
Sandstorm.
yeah. In this particular game, the first 15 seconds is called Sandstorm, which is when they put basically blindfolds on all the drivers. This year is where the drivers stand and look into the field, but they covered all of that, so we have to drive with a camera. So the first 15 seconds isn't very significant. It's basically just team scoring, which is what we did. We put a game piece there, and then we're going to go ahead and screen for this robot right here because we know that that robot can score a lot of points and can fill this up on its own, which is basically really overpowered since it gives you like a big offensive advantage on this team. And then we know that one of them three was going to go ahead and do defense because we were talking to one of the three, which is like part of strategy, talking to enemy teams to find out their weaknesses. And we found out that one of them was really weak in scoring. So we decided to go ahead and screen this robot to make sure that their weak robot cannot get past. And that'll be shown in a second right here. So if you notice, we can't actually cross that middle line until the 15 seconds are up. So right here, our primary driver was just waiting for the 15 seconds to finish. And then this is the robot that was going to do counter defense on that robot, but we were basically screening for them. So if you look at the maneuvers that we're doing, we're going ahead and we're pivoting and blocking right there. And we're also doing some push play to get them across back to their side of the field. Whenever they try to pivot back, we would go ahead and pivot as well, which is what's going on right there. And then we're blocking. If you notice, we're turning perpendicular to them because it's harder for the wheels to move. That's because wheels are straightforward. Like if you're straightforward like that and you're basically back at back, then then you possibly could get pushed if the other team has like a stronger gearbox than you do. At this point, they didn't know what to do, so they went back over there, and then we decided to block there. Here, that robot actually turned off, but we don't get like a notification if the robot is off, so our primary driver just started making sure that this robot wasn't going to score points. We didn't actually like find out that that was completely blocked off because we're on this side over here and you can't really see across until yeah. And then it looks like at that point the robot is back up, but at this point in the match with only 60 seconds left, there's not much that they can do since we were already denying them the counter defense. Again, we're just doing like really deep counter defensive play here. It's like more of a mixture of both defense and counter defense because we were blocking that robot at one point. And then again, they don't know how to get out because this gap here is really small and that gap there is also really small. And then at this point, we were making sure that this robot would also cause a commotion with that robot so that this robot was basically getting in the way of that one. At that point, we let him go across, but it didn't matter because at the 30-second mark, robots can go ahead and start climbing onto these three platforms, which is what's going to happen in a second. I don't really like the camera angles here, but that robot that we were screening for is just going to climb. That robot there is basically just useless. You can't, that robot can't go into that area or it's like a red card. So that robot just basically has to retreat. And we basically did a successful pit maneuver and blocking sequence to make sure that we could screen for like that really good robot right there. Then now we'll move on to a beach blitz match was an off season, which occurred a bit more recently than the Houston World Championships. This time we're on the Red Alliance, which is the left side, and it looks like we're on the far side over there. So again, this is like that sandstorm period, the first 15 seconds of the match. You can't really do anything. So we're just going to score a game piece there. Or looks like it didn't score, but we're going to go ahead and do counter defense. They already knew that we were going to go ahead and do counter defense. And the only reason why we didn't go ahead and do defense for one of those two robots was because we knew that this robot wasn't the best at defense. And we also knew that our robots were still going to score a lot. So, oh, that's unfortunate. We'll just move on.
Just can I just make a note
Looks,
for the previous clip?
yeah, go ahead.
Just to note when that one robot stopped moving and lost connection to like the whole field system. That's actually a fairly uncommon like thing to happen. Usually that's just an electrical problem. That's not what actually happens when you're doing defense. So that was kind of just like a 1 in 100 chance, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, like the chance of that happening was really low. Like we ended up getting kind of lucky because that helped us with our defense. And then again, like our driver didn't really know what to do. It's not like anything considering skill. It's just we don't know how to react like that instantaneously because we were focused on that robot, and again, we were on like the complete other side, and you can't see like that's basically in our blind spot because you can't see at that angle right there because this whole like big middle thing blocks off that exact point of view, which is where that robot was. So that's why our driver went ahead and played deeper defense right there. So at this point, it's kind of a bad angle because this blocks, but we were doing defense on that team right there. I wanted to make sure that they were going to stay in a specific area. I know that they like to cross, which is why I went over there, but they instead decided to. Okay, it's working. They decided to juke me out. Um, at this point, I saw that they were probably going to end up scoring more if I wasn't getting in their way. So I decided to block the entrance into this like scoring retrieval area just to retrieve game parts. And then here, I decided to pivot over here because I could block both that robot and that robot at the same time, which is a big mistake. If both robots get trapped in there, then it's basically game over for them because it's too cramped in there to actually move around a lot. Here you see that this robot is still struggling to get an actual game piece, and we're just going to go here and just keep pinning them down. If you notice, I'm not actually like maintaining a long contact with them because if you have sustained contact with the robot for 5 or more seconds, then that gives the other team penalty points, which is something you don't want to do. Here, that's what I was just talking about. I'll go back a bit. You can see that our robot is right there, and this robot made a mistake by going into that area because now I had complete control over both of those two robots, completely denying them from scoring. And this is really significant when it comes to counter defense because usually you only do counter defense on one robot because it's basically impossible to do counter defense on two because it's only one of you. Here they're completely stuck, so they were basically useless to their alliance, and their other alliance partner was over here doing defense on us. So for like the 5 or so seconds that they were both trapped there was no scoring for them at all. And then it was pretty neck and neck at that point, but since they were both trapped there, it basically guaranteed us to win. Like we got ahead by a lot. Here at this point, I'm just continuing to block them off. There's not much else that I really need to do because we basically sustained the lead. I'm still blocking off their scoring right here. And then I'm trying to do that again where I'm trying to get both of them stuck, which is what happened. They wanted to go over there, but they couldn't because we were right here clashing. And then at this point, it's below the 30-second mark, which is the climbing period. So I retreated because I don't need to be there anymore. And then we're going to go ahead and do a climb right there, which is going to give us a lot of points. And we basically just secured the win by making sure that those robots there couldn't move. Now, this year was significant for us because we were like a defensive heavy robot, and this is a defensive heavy game. So this made us really valuable alliance partners in this Beach Blitz. We were actually the finalists for that competition, and that was literally purely off defense. So this shows that strategy is really significant when it comes to robot play. You don't have to be like the best scorer to actually like place in the top. Now we're gonna move on to robot weaknesses. These are some of the like wheels that were discussed in the previous mechanical presentation. I recommend going back and checking that out. This is like the high grip wheels or the standard wheels that come with the kit of parts. They're prone to slipping if the force is parallel. That's when robots are facing each other, like face at face or back at back. They're overall pretty versatile wheel because they have some grip to them, but you can see through the traction treads. You have omnidirectional wheels. They're generally really easy to push around because the wheels are on those little rollers. Um, these wheels, if robots have them for their drive, are really prone to being pushed around if the force is applied normally, which is basically perpendicular to the robot. We did that a lot in the previous clip. This video will be recorded, so if you want to go back and look at the clips to see what I mean, you can go ahead and do that. The next wheel is a Meccano wheel. Again, these are also really easy to push around because these wheels are intended to go in like a sideways motion. So you're gonna want to push this robot in a sideways motion to make sure that they can't like get around a certain area. And then you also have pneumatic wheels. These generally aren't used and they're tough to push around, but they're not really used because they're just too heavy duty for what goes on, and they're also generally heavy. If a robot has these and you push that robot hard enough, it could actually make the robot bounce, which is dangerous because if you end up tipping a robot, then that's a red card for you. Now move on to two more clips. Here we're not going to watch the entire video. We're just going to watch significant parts. This is like a really old competition in which robots had to shoot frisbees. They were shooting frisbees into those three targets there. I'm going to go to the end of the autonomous phase and to the beginning of teleop. The focus is going to be right here on the left side with this robot. You can see that this robot is a really tall robot, so that means there's going to be prone to tipping. So if you see what happens here, the robot is going to rapidly accelerate here. And then that is a big mistake because they're going to end up tipping right there. And then you don't want to do this because then you're going to be known as a robot that tips. And then when it comes to like alliance selections, you're going to be less, you're basically less susceptible to being picked because if you're going to constantly tip over by just poor like driver decisions, then you're not going to be as valuable as another robot. And then this clip over here is a bit more subtle, so we're going to go ahead and skip a bit. The camera angle here is bad, but the focus is going to be on this side of the screen. I'll actually slow it down to quarter speed so you can see what happens. But this robot was rapidly accelerating. They're probably going to do counter defense somewhere there. And this robot actually has to go to the other side of the field to get points. But what ends up happening is these two robots are going to collide. And then that causes that robot right there to tip. And then you might think that that's actually good for you because that robot can't score any points now. But it's not good to tip over another robot because one, that's just general BM to that robot. And then two, you can also get, well, not you can, you will get a red card for doing that because it could damage the other robot. And then again, if you're going to play super aggressively by like doing things like that, it's not generally worth it because you run the risk of tipping robots over, and that's not good at all for your track record. Now we're going to move on to the last part, which is hypothetical scenarios. Now I'm going to be presenting just like a scenario that I made up yesterday in which you're going to have an enemy alliance and your alliance. So for the enemy alliance, the game is 3v3, so you have 3 robots on both sides. So for the enemy alliance, the first robot has a high OPR and CCWM. So that means that they generally carry their alliance and they're like a scoring powerhouse, but they're prone to tipping. That's like the drawback to that robot. For Robot 2, they have a more average scoring count, and they score a decent amount of points per match. And for Robot 3, they have very low OPR, but they have this high CCWM, which means their defense is high, which is denoted here. They're a defensive powerhouse, and they're known to shut down offensive plays. Now here we have our 3 robots. Robot 1 is average scoring. Robot 2 is like the powerhouse for Robot 1, but Robot 2 doesn't really tip over. And then we have us. We're an average scorer with average OPR and CCWM, but we're also defensive powerhouse. Now, if you were like a primary driver, would you opt to do counter defense or would you opt to do defense for our scoring powerhouse here? Uh, if you want to like participate, go ahead and unmute your mic and then give your opinion.
I guess you could do counter defense to stop Robot 3 on the enemy alliance.
Why would you stop Robot 3?
So we can protect Robot 2 on our alliance.
Okay, so kind of like maybe screening on their side of the field to make sure that they can't get to our side of the field.
Yes.
Yeah. Like there's no real right answer. I would personally ask for more information. Like, are any of the robots susceptible to defense? Which is something that happens. Like sometimes drivers are new and they're going to think that they're just like the best, especially if they come from a really good team. But a common fallback with like newer drivers is that they're really prone to not knowing what to do when it comes to defense. But I personally would probably just from this looking at this scenario, I would go for counter defense as well on Robot 3 to make sure that they can't shut down our Robot 2. And then since this one here is prone to tipping, they might end up screwing themselves over. So like if they're prone to tipping, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will tip, but that could mean that their robot will like wobble at some times. And then when a robot wobbles, it takes a few seconds for the robot to like self-center just because of the force at the top. So they're going to lose time on scoring due to wobble probably. And then this robot here, since they're known to shut down offensive plays, you're going to want to like focus on this robot just from this information alone. And we have one more hypothetical scenario. Again, same 3v3, but this time it's like, are you going to opt for defense or offense? Robot 1 is just a scoring powerhouse. There's no drawback to it. It's just like a really good robot from a really good team. Robot 2 is an average scorer with both average OPR and CCMW, but they're prone to shutting off during matches. Now, what that means is that could mean that they have like an electrical issue, or they could have like a weak connection with their like robot radio that communicates with the game, which means that they're not going to be able to be controlled because it could just be some weird radio issue. Think of it like
Could that also include an exposed power switch?
yes,
Like
actually.
if another robot hits their power switch, then it shuts them off.
Yeah, we'll go on a quick tangent right here. Yeah, that actually happened to us. We had an exposed power switch and another robot just happened to hit our power switch, which caused our robot to shut down during the middle of the match. We weren't damaged and that match was like called official, but we were still able to pull back. So anyways, yeah, so Robot 2 is prone to shutting off during matches. Think of it like a Wi-Fi issue kind of when you can't connect to something. That's basically what's happening with Robot 2. And for Robot 3, they're a weak scorer and they never attempted to do defensive play and they have below average OPR and CCMW. Now for your alliance, your first robot is broken, and which means that they can only do defense because they can't like score or offense. Like let's say their arm is broken or whatever. So they opt to do counter defense because Robot 2 is an average scorer and we Robot 3 are also an average scorer. So they want to do counter defense on Robot 1. Now, with that being said, would you opt to do defense for Robot 2 or just our alliance in general, or would you go ahead and do offense to try and score as many points as you can? Go ahead and unmute if you have a opinion.
I think we should score offense because Robot 1 on our alliance already is gonna like try to shut down a Robot 1 on the enemy alliance, and the other two robots in the enemy alliance aren't really a threat.
Yeah, I also would go with that. This actually happened with us back in Beach Blitz in 2019. Our predicted match win was like really low. So basically it was just a bunch of statistical people saying that we had a certain percent chance of winning this match, and our percent chance of winning was really low because this robot was broken and this robot was really good. So we let them go ahead and do counter defense and we scored, which basically we gave them pointers like going back to the wheel slide by showing how to shut down this robot, and we basically secured a very tight win against that alliance. So again, this shows that strategy is very important when it comes to robot play. It isn't just scoring like 100 points per game. Although that is super valuable, if you don't know how to get around like a defense robot, or if you don't know how to communicate with your alliance partners on the field, then you're not going to be as valuable. Strategy is just a tool to make sure that your robot is always valuable no matter what happens. Robots will break because some of the action that goes on the field is just really rough for the robots. So you always want to make sure that you have a backup plan. Overall, thank you. If you have any other questions, then you can go ahead and unmute your mic or go ahead and ask them. Um, let's see. Are there any questions for strategy or any other questions? Maybe like
What is alliance or alliance selections?
Okay, well, an alliance is just a team of 3 different robots, and then alliance selections happens at the end of the qualifications. Now, during qualifications, your team is going to be getting ranking points, and you get basically 2 ranking points for a win, and then 0 for a loss and 1 for a tie. And then you also get more ranking points for doing things on the field. We won't go into depth on that. But basically, when you win or tie or lose, you're getting ranking points, and that will essentially lead into like a pick list. And what was your question? What were you asking?
Just what alliance
Alliance
selections
selection?
were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the top 8 teams, which is the top 8 in terms of ranking points, are going to become alliance captains for like the quarterfinals, finals, like basically the playoffs. And then all those people will choose 2 more robots to join their playoff alliance. And you want to be able to appeal to one of the top 8 people or one of the top 8 teams if you're not one of the top 8 or close to the top 8. Now, an example of what happened back at Beach Blitz for us in 2019 is we were the 10th place team. And then during alliance selections, like the first place alliance decided to choose, I think, like the third place alliance, which is something that they could do. And basically, since that happened, every single robot moved up a set. So the 8th place team was now technically the 7th place team, and the 9th place team was now the 8th place team. So this happened a couple more times, and then we were all of a sudden a an alliance captain. And then what an alliance captain does is that they look at all the robots' strategies and they look at all the robot strengths and weaknesses. And they basically try to find the top 2 best robots that fit for their robot. Now, we were a defensive robot in 2019. So what we wanted is we wanted to make sure that we can get a offensive powerhouse, meaning that it is a very versatile robot that can do both game pieces, since there were 2 game pieces that year. And then we would also want either another powerhouse, which would help us score more points, or we would want a support robot, which can like dump a lot of one of the game pieces to score a bunch of points here and there. So that's basically what we ended up doing. And then again, that was just a bunch of strategy as well. Any other questions?
Okay, so if there are not going to be any questions, then we can wrap up this meeting. Thank you, Fernando, for presenting your introduction to strategy. Have a great day and rest of your break, everybody.